guys. Welcome to a brand new screen team right here on KWOC. And thank you so much for listening on KWOC. Thank you for watching on our YouTube and Facebook accounts. I'm happy and excited to be joined by Sue. Sue is with the Poplar Bluff Public Library, and she always comes in. She always reviews some really, really classic films, some great films, some films that maybe we haven't really thought of in a while. And she always comes with a great deal of knowledge.
That's a high compliment, Chris, and I appreciate it.
It's a true compliment. It really is. Sue, we are here. It is Veterans Day, and it is a celebration of veterans all across the United States, whether they were in the the Navy, the Marines, the Army, the Air Force, the National Guard, whatever branch of service they were in. This is a day to honor them, correct?
Absolutely, and we should honor our veterans because I think that's where we can give thanks for our freedom.
Sure.
Because if we were to be overrun by some government or something like that, who would be fighting for our rights? It would be those soldiers out there, and thank you for doing that. As I did last year, I want to thank my grandfather, my father, and my husband for the service that they've given to this country.
Now you're making me look bad.
No, not at all. Not at all.
I want to double down on that as well, man. Sue, let's talk about the movies that we're picking today. We are doing World War I films, and what I found interesting about World War I films is there's not very many in Hollywood. Hollywood does a lot of World War II films, a lot of Civil War films, Vietnam films, but World War I kind of a little bit gets the shaft a little bit. Why did you want to choose all these World War I flicks?
Well, on November 11th, of 2018 is the 100th commemoration and anniversary of what we used to call Armistice Day. It is now called Veterans Day for the most part. But on the 11th day of the 11th hour of the 11th month in 2018, the Treaty of Versailles was signed in Paris, France, and it brought the end to World War I. World War I was known as the Great War. It was known as the war to end all wars. Well, obviously, it wasn't. We continued to fight, but they thought at that time. It was one of the first wars that we had in which there were so many nations involved in conflict and in battle with one another. Mainly, they fought in France. They fought in the Argonne and Verdun, and it was a gruesome war. So many people not only lost their lives, but also there were lots of losses of limbs and so on. It was also a time whenever war changed, it was no longer a war of hand-to-hand combat, but it was a war where you had guns that had 69-foot barrels, and there were guns called the Paris Annihilator and the Big Bertha, and those were some of the guns that the Germans had. And the reason that the war started is there are a lot of historical reasons, but you have to look at where it began, and it began over the shooting of one man in Yugoslavia, and there was also other things going on around that, but it was also a time when anarchy was starting to raise its head. Also, we look at World War I, and we wouldn't have had World War II if it hadn't been for the Treaty of Versailles, because Germany claimed, and probably rightfully so, that their hands were strung and that they couldn't be able to do what they needed to do to recover from World War I, because they punished Germany very, very badly at that time. And
in the end, a man came to power that shouldn't have come to power.
Exactly. I prefer not to speak his name, if you don't mind. I sort of like Harry Potter.
I like that. That's nice. So we're going to do, first up is a movie called Sergeant York. And tell us a little bit about this film, Sue.
Well, it was a film, starred Gary Cooper, big box office. Gary Cooper even later became a war hero of his own in World War II. And Gary Cooper won an Academy Award for Best Actor for this particular film. We look back, and it was done in 1942, December 7th, 1942. America had the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and we went to war. And this film came out about that time, so it had in terms of timing, it was perfect.
Yeah.
It was perfect in terms of patriotism. It was in terms of getting our people to enlist. In fact, they said people would go watch Sergeant York and go enlist. And Sergeant York still has people getting killed. I sometimes think, boy, you're going to enlist and though you're going to get killed. I realized patriotism. The other part of Sergeant York that I think that has historical significance and sociological significance is the fact that you had a man who struggled with whether, and he was drafted, and struggled with the idea of being a conscientious objector and following the Bible and saying, thou shalt not kill, and learning about his patriotism and rendering unto Caesar what is Caesar's. And that's one, and those phrases are used. But you have to understand, Sergeant York was not a very nice man. He came from a hardscrabble life in Tennessee. And watching the film and having lived in Tennessee, I knew the area. I'd visited that area, and it was really, the last time I'd seen the film, I had not done that. So it brought things to life, and they tried to stay as true to the historical note as they could with this film. There has been some who, and the Germans were some of those who claimed, no, he did not do what he did, but there has been research done. And in fact, in the History Today magazine, there's an article that talks about how true to life the film is and how true to life the story is of Sergeant York. He won the Congressional Medal. No, he did not single-handedly, but he was probably 80 to 90% the one who captured a German's machine gun nest, and they captured over 150 German soldiers and saved several lives as a result. And that's one of the things they asked Sergeant York, with your conscientious objector, why did you do this? And he said, because I knew that I would save lives in order to take a life. And that sometimes is the hard decision our soldiers have to make.
Sure. How did Gary Cooper do in this film?
I like Gary Cooper, so you have to.
So you're a little biased? Is that what you're telling me?
I'm a little biased. And as you know, as Chris already said, I like old films. I like to bring old films forward and things that not many people watch. But this is an appropriate time to bring this film together for us. And the library has shown it in the theater as a part of our celebration of World War I and what we're doing with World War I.
Does the movie still hold up?
Yes, in my opinion, it does. It's old-fashioned, and I think that's what we forget sometimes when we approach older films, that we have to look at the context and the time in which those films were made. Honestly,
that's what I like about them. When I go to those movies, I'm looking for that, that old-fashionedness about them. I don't know. It makes you. It feels like white picket fences and everything's going to be okay. That's what I love about those older movies. So even though they may not hold up to today's standards and they might not be as realistic, there's something deeply, I don't want to say magical, but it makes you feel at home. So.
It does. I agree with you. And like I said, and those places still exist and they're still there, and we're still talking about Sergeant York.
Very true. The movie's called Sergeant York, starring Gary Cooper. We will have more of our Veterans Day theme show right here on the Screen Team. We've got Warhorse coming your way next on the Screen Team.